Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do. To educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's show. Very excited for the guest that I have with me today, because this is a topic that we've talked about before on this podcast and something that I think is very applicable to what is going on. I've got Dr. Edward Brodkin with me. Dr. Edward Brodkin, he actually goes by Ted. So Ted, welcome to be here. But he is a doctor, and I'm going to let you tell a little bit about yourself. But the book is a book that I was really excited to see and really excited to talk to you about. The book is called Missing Each Other. And there's a co-author on this book that we should mention, Ashley Palathra, I believe is how you pronounce her name. And I'm really excited you are here to tell us a little bit about what we are doing wrong in this area of connection. Why are things sort of so lonely? We're having such a difficult time connecting in today's society. And we have all these divisive types of subject matter that we're dealing with: climate change, COVID, Black Lives Matter, all of this kind of stuff. So it's really the perfect book for the perfect time. Where I would love to start, with your permission, is just a little bit about your background in particular and why you felt this book was so important to write at this time.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying thank you for having me on your show. It's a great show. I love the themes you cover in your show. So about me. So like you said, my name's Edward Brodkin. People call me Ted. I'm a doctor. Like you said, I'm a psychiatrist. I specialize in psychiatry. And I'm a faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm an associate professor of psychiatry at Penn. And my focus has been on autism spectrum disorder, and especially on social difficulties that people on the autism spectrum have had. And this book came out of research that I did with Ashley Palathra, the co-author, in which we were working on developing some supports for adults on the autism spectrum. So these adults that we were working with were a really bright group. I mean, they were intellectually bright. Many of them went to college. They were working. Some of them had relationships. But one of the defining features of the autism spectrum is difficulties with social communication, with connecting, with forming, maintaining relationships. And so we worked on these supports for them. And as we were working on it, we thought, I think what we're really trying to teach people is the essence of human connection. And we ended up using a word for it that I'm sure we'll get into, that what we called attunement. In fact, the program we developed, we called Tune In. It stands for something: training to understand and navigate emotions and interactions. But this concept of attunement, we thought about it more and more. And the more we thought about it, the more we thought, it's really not just adults on the autism spectrum who have difficulty with this. I think many of us, regardless of, what walk of life we're from, find this challenging. No one's perfect at it. And, we even thought to ourselves, Ashley and I thought, even we sometimes struggle with this. So maybe this is something that would be really a useful book for the general public to really delve into this.
I love that you did this. Part of my definition, this is the Next Level Human podcast, obviously, and part of my definition of a next level human is someone who is working on themselves, growing themselves while trying to evolve the world. We oftentimes think there's this duality where it's like, if I'm taking care of myself, then I can't take care of other people. And I would call that sort of a very base level way of looking at the world, where it's just all about me. And then the next level up, sort of this idea that I'm really just all about my team or my family or my nation. And I don't care about, any sort of deliverables or things that I can do to enhance the world. And then there's the next level human, which is sort of like, I'm growing myself so that I can give something of benefit to the world. And that's essentially what you all have done here, right? You've essentially said, we're going to do our work, our professional work, but we're also going to make it more available to the masses, because it's important work that can have a positive impact on the way people connect. And I just love that, and just want to say thank you for that. I do think creators in this regard, people might not know this, Ted, but you know this, you and I, there's a lot. You're busy. You're a busy guy. If you look at your, the things you're up to a lot of things. So the idea of putting out a book, which you and I both know, not a lot of people know, but putting out a book is not something that makes you massive amounts of money and gets you fame and fortune and all this stuff. It really is a love of labor, and something that we essentially say, I'm going to put this out into the world to make a difference. So thank you so much for that. And my first sort of way that I like to delve into this is, it's really, I'm going to phrase it as a statement, but it's really a question for you to kind of see, Jade, is this, that's right, or Jade, that's kind of wrong. The way I've always seen this is that I've always seen it as, we humans desperately want people to pay attention to us, to show us love, to, listen to what we're saying, to, find us interesting and important. And I have found in my life that the more I make that the goal of mine, to get other people to pay attention to me, the less I'm able to actually have that happen. And probably somewhere in my late 30s, early 40s, I really sort of doubled down on this idea that if I want connection and I want people to pay attention to me, I should set my goal and my task to paying attention to them, to speaking to them, to taking an interest in them. And so the question, it was kind of phrased as a statement, but my question is, am I getting this right? Am I somewhere in the ballpark here? How is it that we can connect? Do we have to, start paying way more attention to other people? Is it about being more interesting so other people pay attention to us? What's the broad, sort of strokes here in terms of how we get better and less loneliness and more connection in our lives?
Well, I'll say something overall, and then I'll get into the details. The overall is everything you just said, I totally agree with. First, I love the theme of your podcast, that idea that working on yourself could then bring something to the world. And I also agree with what you just said, that, rather than focusing so much on the attention you're getting from other people and trying to get attention, the idea of starting by listening to other people, I think, is a really good way to start. And one thing I would add, maybe even before that, this is what we lay out in the book, is, believe it or not, a good place, the most fundamental place to start is by learning to take care of yourself, to relax yourself, to calm yourself down, to kind of get in touch with yourself. And there are several methods that we lay out in the book for doing that. And so if you can have an awareness of yourself and you feel calm and centered and grounded, not full of tension anymore, and then from that state of groundedness and calmness, if you give your attention to someone else and really try to listen to them and listen to what they're expressing, I think you're going to then get back from them a lot. If you start by tuning into them and listening to them and giving them that generosity, I think they're going to return that in kind. Not always, but many, many times. I think you'd be surprised, not necessarily you, but others might be surprised at how much you will get back from doing that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that thought. It's really interesting that what didn't at first occur to me, to quiet my own mind, to sort of know myself, to understand what's going on with myself before I start paying attention to other people. So let's stay there for just a second. So when you say that, what exactly does this entail? Because we have mindfulness types of practices, meditation. We have time alone, which is something that I think is extremely undervalued in our society. It's almost like in my life, I've seen being alone has helped me be better with other humans. And I'm wondering if this is what you're tapping into. So can you give me an idea of what this actually looks like? So what does it mean? Because I think a lot of people who might be feeling lonely are kind of maybe be thinking, well, what does that mean to kind of go within myself? Isn't that just giving me more loneliness? And I suspect there's something more here. It sounds like it's about knowing yourself and appreciating yourself, or calming your own internal storms before you can show up present for other people. But what exactly do you mean or recommend for us to more get in touch with ourselves so we can get in touch with others?
Yeah, I think you just said it really well, like calming your own internal storms before you're ready to connect with others. And in the book, we talk about this concept of attunement overall. Maybe I should just say what that is. So it's this idea of both tuning in and being aware of yourself, and being aware of the other person and what's coming from them, and the interaction between you. So let's start with a couple of examples of that. So
yeah, that'd be great.
If two people are in a really good conversation where it feels like you're really communicating well, you're really clicking, you're really understanding each other, it's like you're in sync. That's a good example of an attuned interaction or attunement. But it's not always just in conversation. Other examples we give are in sports. Like if you think of two basketball teammates on a fast break down the court, and they're going really fast, and one just makes the perfect pass, puts the ball right where the other one needs it just to dunk it in the basket. There's a lot of attunement going on between the two of them. They're both in motion, but they're aware of themselves. They're aware of their own position on the court, their teammates' position. They're even attuned and aware of the other players, so they can pass it in such a way that it gets to their teammate with the perfect timing. So that's a highly attuned interaction, actually. This kind of awareness of yourself, awareness of the other person, awareness of this dynamic interaction that's happening between you. Or one more example might be either like a musician or a dancer. Like, let's say you and I are jamming out together and playing music, right, on two different instruments. I've got to be aware of what I'm playing, what I'm doing, what you're playing and what you're doing. I have to listen really carefully to you, and I've got to stay with you, stay in interaction. We have to stay with each other. There's sort of leading and following that's going on. So that's another kind of example of a highly attuned interaction. And so now, just to go back to your question, like, so why do you need to start with yourself, and how do you even do that? So we lay out this framework in the book for attunement, this sort of 4-part framework. And the first part is what we're talking about now. The most fundamental part is what we call relaxed awareness. And we describe it as a state of mind and body in which you are aware, you're aware of yourself, you're aware of what's around you, but you're also able to stay relaxed and not very tense. And so this is the state we're talking about. And to develop that state of relaxed awareness, well, first of all, you might wonder, well, why do you need that state to be attuned? And I think it's what you just said before. If you're full of your own inner storms, like if I'm really caught up in what's going on in my head and really tense about what happened yesterday in my life, and my body's tense, and it's going to be really hard for me to pay attention to you and tune into you. I'm preoccupied with myself. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you're really, really stressed out, in a way you're caught up in yourself, but in a way you can almost lose yourself. I may not even be aware of how tense I am and how I'm coming across, right? So it's this process of tuning into yourself, paying attention, feeling where your tension is, and relaxing that tension, releasing that tension. And then you can get yourself into a state where you're ready to really listen to another person. So I think that's what we're talking about. And I know that if you're feeling lonely, you may be like, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to do that. But I think it's a really good investment of time. And it doesn't even necessarily take that much time. I mean, once you try out some of the exercises in our book, and if you practice them regularly, a few minutes a day, really, it could be as simple as just relaxing your shoulders, taking a breath. In 10 seconds, you can sort of clear your head a little bit. And then I'm more ready to listen to you. So that's really what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like a little bit of Csikszentmihalyi's flow state. It also sounds a lot like the study of charisma and that aspect of presence, very charismatic people being very present. So it sounds like it's tapping into this idea. It's funny. I have this one friend who I grew up with, who every time he's a guy and was always interested in women, they were very rarely interested in him. And if you sat with him when he was talking to women, you would see right away he couldn't connect. It was like he was too in his head about what to say. And he also would be non-responsive when they had asked him stuff. He would be looking to say things versus listening. They would almost seem off the cuff, like, what conversation are you in? And so I'm imagining he must have been sort of in this sort of conversation with himself while he's trying to have a conversation with someone else. And it would constantly block him. One of the other things that he used to do is he would find, like probably with you and I, if we're talking back and forth, and I might say, yeah, I spent time in New York City. And you might say, oh yeah, I used to live on 73rd in York, or whatever it is. And we find a way to, sort of sync up with common interest. This particular person would always find a way to blow that up. Like the woman might say, I drive a Honda Civic, and he's just like, I hate that car, so he never could exactly sync up. And it sounds like what you were saying is that this friend of mine may have had a very difficult time even sitting with himself without criticisms against himself or without constant chatter in his own mind, because he certainly couldn't hold it together with, the people that he was trying to communicate with. And I did notice it wasn't just with the women, but he had difficulty with communication with lots of people. Part of the reason we were friends is because one of the things about me, I think my friends would say about me, is I am someone who is fine putting aside my own agenda to hear your particular story. And I am genuinely interested in people's stories. So would you say this is exactly what was going on with him? And how would I, like, if I could go back in time and talk to him, what, like, maybe 2 things or 3 things might you say these are the things that he should be working on to fix this state?
Yeah, that's a great example. And that's a great example of someone, and I don't mean to pile on with your friend here, but that's a great example of someone, it sounds like, who's struggling with attunement and at multiple levels. Like, I agree that at the level we were just talking about, the foundational level of relaxed awareness, it sounds like he had trouble getting into that state, that he was probably, if he found some woman he was talking to attractive, he probably got nervous, and his way of maybe coping with that tension and nervousness was to think of pre-prepared lines, let's say, that he wanted to say. So he wasn't present in the sense of responding to the actual person in front of him and the actual moment and what the moment called for with that person. He was overly focused on what was in his own head. So he hadn't sort of cleared out his head, ready to meet whatever and whoever was there in front of him. And therefore, he had trouble, like you said, with listening. Like, he wasn't, which is the next level of attunement, the next component of attunement that we talk about after relaxed awareness, is listening. So it sounds like, because his head was swimming in anxieties and tensions and lines that he could use, he wasn't able to kind of just open himself up and listen to. And when I say listen, I don't necessarily just mean listen to what she was saying, but also take in all the other person's cues, like notice visually what's going on with that other person, or, take in all these cues. So he wasn't able to listen and understand where this other person was. And then he wasn't able to meet her where she is. Or if she offered something up, like, I have a Honda, instead of kind of meeting her in a friendly way or relating to that in a way that would promote connection, he, for whatever reason, would be like, I hate that car, which would in a sense, he was meeting her, but like you said, he's shutting it down. He's shutting down. Like, where do you go from there once you say, I hate your car? Yeah. I think that's a really good example of someone who's having difficulty with this. Yeah.
So one of the things that, I know that having looked at your work, so there's different tools that you use. And one of the ones we all know about, but not a lot of people in the Western world love to practice. Some people do, but meditation is sort of one. I'll tell you one of the things, I'll tell you what I do, but I also want to know from the expert, would you call this practicing relaxed awareness? What I do is I love long drives in the car, and people think I'm nuts, but I've driven back and forth cross country several times. And they say, what are you doing in the car? And I'm like, well, I listen to books on tape. I said, but I also like driving meditation. And they go, what the hell is that? Like, they think your eyes are closed and you're oming and ahhing or whatever, and you're going to go flying off the road. But what I do is in the car, I can get in this very relaxed state where I can just let passing things, like I'll see a squirrel cross the road in front of me, and I'm like, oh, interesting, that's a squirrel. I'll feel sort of the way my body sits in the seat. I'll notice all the different sounds that come and go and all the different colors that come and go. And I'm just letting an experience pass around me and sort of through me, and just letting the next sort of thing show up, and then watching how I feel about it in a very detached sort of state. And it's interesting. I've oftentimes done this on nature walks. I do the same thing. There's different ways that I have done this. And I wonder, I've done this since I was little. And I wonder, is that me practicing this state of relaxed awareness? Would you, someone who studied this, call this, some kind of meditation? Or am I doing something completely different? I'm unsure.
In my opinion, that is a form of meditation, because you are very present in the moment. You're aware of what's going on moment to moment, even as things change. And it sounds to me like you're in an aware, alert state, but you're also relaxed. So yes, I think that's a form of meditation. I think there's many different forms of meditation. When people hear the word meditation, they typically think of someone sitting cross-legged, maybe on a yoga mat,
eyes closed, lotus pose, all that.
All that. But even in like classical forms of meditation, there's one called walking meditation, like Buddhist meditation. There's a sitting meditation, but there's also a walking meditation, sort of slow walking, very aware, mindful of every step. So there are forms of moving meditation, even going back thousands of years. And I would call that state that you were in a type of relaxed awareness. And did it feel good to you? I mean, it sounds like you enjoyed that in some way.
Yeah, in some way, it almost feels like, and it's still very much a part of my life. I've never really seen it as meditation, though, but it allows me to, it is very recharging to me. Like, one of my favorite things to do is just go walk around the city. And I have a little puppy, and sometimes I just put my headphones in, but they're not on. And it's really just to keep people from talking to me. Not that I don't want to connect, but I just want to experience things. And it just makes me feel more light and, it's just sort of more understanding. It's definitely helped me, I think, in picking up subtleties. Like, one of the things, and I want to ask you about this, is that one of the things that I just love about humans, like when you're in a big group of people and everyone's talking, and there's just somebody maybe in the room who's not quite included, and certain people pick up on that subtly and unconsciously. And then subtly and unconsciously, without anyone being aware, they gently pull this person back into the conversation. These are the people that I love. And I think I've gotten better at that as I've gone. But I think maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe this relaxed awareness part of your attunement model has allowed me to get better at doing that. Like, if you and I were all hanging out with my family, and I was just like, Ted's kind of feeling left out right now, and I picked up on that, I wouldn't want to draw attention to it. Like, hey, Ted, what's wrong with you? How come you're not talking to me? I would just want to subtly begin to include you. And I do think that this awareness is something that I have cultivated and kind of gotten better with, watching people who I respect and admire, but also just paying close attention in sort of a detached way. And I love those kind of humans, because they do kind of hold the whole, sort of gathering together for all of us, making no one feel left out,
Yeah, no, I think that really is a good illustration. When someone let's say, going with your example, if I were with your family and I was being really quiet and looking uncomfortable, there can be, I look uncomfortable and that might make you look uncomfortable, and then your family gets uncomfortable, and the sort of tension builds a little bit, and that no one's sure what to say to me or what to do with me. But in your example, it sounds like you are aware of that and you're relaxed enough. You're not getting so tense that you don't do anything. But then you reach out. Actually, what you described really incorporates a few elements of these several elements of attunement. It's like you were relaxed and aware. You're listening in the sense, even though I'm not saying anything, you're picking up on my cues that I'm feeling somehow uncomfortable, and you're understanding me. You're sort of taking my perspective, like, well, Ted looks like he's uncomfortable over there. Maybe he doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know how to re-enter the conversation. And then somehow you're finding a graceful way of like meeting me where I am, like reaching out to me in some way and then drawing me back into the conversation. So I think that's a really nice example of like being attuned and using that to reach out and connect.
It reminds me of, some people will say that they'll say, I'm an empath. You ever hear that term?
Yeah.
I don't love that term, but do you think there's something, to that? Is that partly what we're talking about here? This idea of like, I'm putting myself in, Ted's shoes, or Ted's putting himself in Jade's shoes, and sort of looking at it from that perspective and allowing us to kind of be like, well, if I was in a new situation, or if I was on, I don't know, a first date, or I might want to feel this particular way. And maybe that's another way of kind of connecting with people. I just wonder what your take is on this idea of empath, and because I know people say that a lot, and I always wonder, is that really a thing, or aren't we all empathic, or are there some people who just feel deeper and tap into people better than others?
Well, I think there's variability among people and how easily that comes to them, and there are some people, I think, who just have a natural knack for being empathic, for kind of resonating with others emotionally, kind of feeling what they're feeling and being able to step in their shoes, so to speak, and take their perspective. I think, we all have some of that, but I think it comes more naturally to some people. And that idea of empathy is definitely part of our larger attunement model. And we talk about two kinds of empathy. Sometimes in the research literature, they talk about these sort of two sides of empathy. One is what people call emotional empathy or affective empathy, which means it means emotionally resonating with someone. So like let's say you, Jade, were feeling sad today, and I'm sitting here talking to you, and then I kind of start to feel sad, and I realize that's coming from you, but it's like I'm resonating with you. That's what we call emotional empathy. There's another kind of empathy called cognitive empathy, which is more, like the name suggests, it's more intellectual, it's more mental, where I can take your perspective. Like I can, even though I'm looking at a screen now where you're on the screen, I know you're looking at a screen with me on the screen. Actually, we can both see both of each other probably with the Zoom, but you kind of know what I mean. It's like, I can imagine that you have a different perspective from mine, and that things look differently to you from mine. And I can kind of go back and forth and realize, like, all right, Jade and I have different perspectives, and it's not that mine's right and his is wrong, or vice versa. It's we each have a different perspective, and that's just how it is. And so if you want to connect with someone, it's good to be aware of that.
Yeah, I love this idea of attunement, because one of the things that I've oftentimes seen with people is that they come at conversations from different perspectives. And I do want to talk to you a little bit, because I know I want to get into some of the stuff that you've written about in your book about COVID and other types of things, and how these things are keeping us apart. But one of the things that I think happens with humans is we will oftentimes look to connect, but we don't realize that we're coming to the conversation with a different goal set. For example, some people come and they just want to win. You know what I mean? Their goal is to be like, what I want to get my point across, or I want my opinion to dominate. I want to prove that my beliefs are right. And of course, me in my younger days, being a little bit ignorant and arrogant, I didn't realize it consciously, but I was always having conversations where I was trying to convince people of my point of view and prove that my beliefs were right. Since I've gotten a little bit older and gotten into middle age, I now show up with the goal to learn, where all of a sudden my goal is not to, have Ted take on my beliefs, but my goal is to understand Ted's values and beliefs. And I imagine, again, it's just like having this conversation with you now and saying, oh, I get it now. So all this personal development and self-development stuff, no wonder I have deeper friendships now, deeper connection now, because I'm no longer trying to win. I'm trying to understand. I'm no longer trying to have relationships where I'm the smartest person in the room. I want relationships that can grow me, right? And so all of a sudden I'm seeing that this relaxed awareness maybe goes back even further into just self-understanding and understanding I'm not the only person on the planet. Like, I bet you it would be cool for you and I to do a research study where we could track people's eyes on Zoom. And I bet you the ones who are focused on themselves, because, right now I'm looking at you and me. I couldn't look at you and read you, or I could just look at me and be like, oh, Jade, look how handsome you are, or whatever, like, whatever it is. And I imagine that there are people who are more relating to themselves. Like, I'm talking to you, but I'm checking myself out versus talking to you. And I can tell you, as a young man, I think I was more that person who was more interested in how I'm showing up. Whereas now I'm more interested in learning how you show up. So it's a kind of a fascinating sort of discussion, this whole idea of relaxed awareness, because it does seem like to get to that point, you really do have to have a lot of self-understanding. And I'm wondering about your research on autistics and whether or not they're able to do this and to what degree they can do it. Because I know there's a spectrum there, but it's just a thought that maybe you have some things to add to that. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about one of my favorite new products. And to start out, I want to ask you a question. If you had to follow your friends around who are not the healthiest in the world and see what they are doing, what would be the number one thing you would probably tell them to do to start? For most people, that's going to be drinking more water, right? This is something that we talk about all the time in health and fitness. It's almost as if we think of it as an afterthought now, because obviously water is so crucial. However, we oftentimes get this wrong. For example, did you know that when it comes to hydration, just drinking water can make things worse? Most people don't know this. Why? Partly because most people are over drinking water and under consuming the electrolytes that help water do its job. What we don't realize is that hydration is not just about water. It's about electrolytes, the minerals in there, as well as getting that water into the cells. And so you do not want to be over consuming water if you're not getting your electrolytes right. And this opens up a whole new discussion because most people are not getting their electrolytes right. For example, did you know that low sodium, too low sodium, is an issue? Just as much, if not more so, than high sodium. In other words, what we want if we're going to get the right electrolytes is to get the right amount of sodium and potassium and magnesium in the Goldilocks zone. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. We want it just right. This opens up a whole other thing here too, because people who are exercising, doing sauna therapies, doing low carb diets are disrupting and losing lots and lots of their electrolytes. For example, when insulin is not around in low carb diets, you will excrete lots of sodium. In other words, under that state, exercising, low carb diets, all these things, you actually need more sodium. And so if you're somebody who has been just drinking water, not paying attention to electrolytes, and also feeling fatigued, feeling like you're underperforming, not sleeping right, getting cramps, twitches, headaches, any of these things, then you are probably dealing with an electrolyte issue. This is where the product Element comes in. This product has been a game changer for me and many, many of my patients and clients. This is a rehydration electrolyte beverage, basically. It is a powder of electrolytes formulated with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams magnesium without the added sugar and other nonsense that comes in beverages like Gatorade. This stuff is basically a rehydration beverage on steroids. It is the thing that is going to replenish your electrolytes in the right ratios, decrease fatigue, really correct chronic dehydration. And by the way, many people are dehydrating themselves, becoming hyponatremic, low sodium, when they're consuming too much water. You need your electrolytes on board, especially if you are someone who is losing lots of sodium and other electrolytes through low carb diets and lots of exercise. This is where Element comes in. Element is a new sponsor to the Next Level Human podcast. I cannot recommend this product enough. I have been using this stuff for months now, and I have immediately seen changes in my energy levels. I feel like I'm operating on a whole other level, and I have seen this as being the primary thing that people who have been using Element have been telling me, that their fatigue is getting better, especially fatigue that comes after very intense workouts that involve lots of sweating and lots of intense output from the nervous system. Please check out Element. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. DrinkElement.com. That's DrinkLMNT.com. DrinkElement.com, and let's get back to the show. Sorry to break in. I want to cover one of my sponsors, Organifi. Now, look, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, and many of you who know me well know this, but shockingly, I cannot stand vegetables. I really do not like vegetables. I have not liked them since a child. I think it has something to do with my mom, who cooked everything just boiled everything, no salt, no fat, no taste, period. And so I developed an extreme dislike for almost all vegetables. And still to this day, I have a difficult time getting in my fruits and vegetables. Well, Organifi, started by my good friend Drew Canoli, who I've developed a relationship over the years, and I am really sort of tickled that we finally get to do this together with Organifi sponsoring the Next Level Human podcast. Drew is a Next Level Human. Organifi is a Next Level Human company. I can't say enough about them. I'm excited for them to be on board as a sponsor for the Next Level Human podcast. My favorite products, let me tell you about them. They have a ton, but I use 3 pretty much every day. I use Organifi Gold before I go to sleep. This is their turmeric tea based on sort of the old Ayurvedic golden milk. It is absolutely fantastic. It contains lots of different relaxing herbs, turmeric, tastes wonderful. And one of the things this has done for me is I had a very bad wine habit at night. It started out as just 1 glass of wine. Lately, it's turned into 2, 3, and sometimes a bottle. What I've done starting in 2021 is use Organifi. This is what I have in lieu of wine. And I sit there just like I used to sit with my wine, and I have the Organifi Gold. I also use the green and red juice powders. I have never liked greens and reds juices, period. These powders to me always tasted like swamp water. I use 1 scoop of the greens, 1 scoop of the reds first thing in the morning before my coffee. It has become a ritual over the last several years. It is fantastic. Those are the ones I use the most. Of course, they have a great line of protein products, and they have a new Organifi Gold chocolate, which I have not tried yet, but I cannot wait to try that because you all know I love cocoa powder and use it for lots of different things, for cravings and everything else. Check out Organifi, Organifi.com. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. Please take care of Organifi the same way they're taking care of the earth, doing amazing things as a company, and now taking care of the Next Level Human podcast so we can all be together and have these discussions. Organifi.com. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. Let's get back to the show. Here we go.
Yeah, well, I really, again, I really relate to what you're saying, and I think that that idea that, you know, if you approach a conversation with wanting to win or wanting to get your point across or wanting to dominate, That can work well if you're like on a debate team, and the point is you're in a competition, and your goal is to just win, to score the most points with the judges. But even if, but let's just say it's a more natural interaction between two people. Even if you're trying to convince them, sometimes laying out all your evidence, trying to win the argument, sometimes that will get through to them. But I would say more times than not, it won't work because you're coming across to the other person as sort of domineering, forcing your point of view, trying to score points. And sometimes people react to that by just tuning out. They're like, all right, whatever. He's just lecturing at me, or he's doing whatever. So I think the way that you've come to approach this of trying to learn about the other person, it's like, if you come to me wanting to learn about me, my reaction is, wow, this guy's actually interested in me. He's listening to me. This is so cool. I like this guy. And then if you start, then in that context, we've started to form a connection. And then if you start saying something about your point of view, I'm probably more likely to listen to you more now. So it's kind of paradoxical. Rather than coming full guns blasting, trying to win and convince someone, instead, if you invest in just getting that connection started and investing in that first, you're actually going to have more power in that interaction, so to speak. I don't mean power to dominate necessarily, but you're going to have the power to communicate. You're going to have the power to have the other person's attention, have them listen more.
Yeah. What's the martial art? Is it Aikido or Judo? I can't remember which one uses the force of the other people. I think it's both, perhaps.
I think it's both. Yeah.
But I think it reminds me of that a little bit, right? It's almost like social Judo or social Aikido. It's almost like if I understand other humans, because I understand myself, and I want Ted to like me and connect with me and see me as a good guy, and like, but if I just take that and say, well, he wants the same thing. So if I give him that, right, then I am more likely to get what I want, right? It's almost like I can't believe how many all of these conversations, and I'll give a little bit of my political background here, and people will hate this, but so for me, I am extremely moderate. I can't stand the Democrats or the Republicans politically, right? They're just too extreme for me. But my view on Donald Trump is pretty strong. I just don't really like the guy. I find him dehumanizing and other things. But when I talk to people who are Donald Trump supporters, rather than me going, oh my God, I can't stand Donald Trump. He's this, and this. For me, I am genuinely interested to know why and what they love about him. And I've learned so much about myself and other people. One of the things I've learned is that this idea, I think what a lot of people do in our society today is they just go, oh, you believe this, you're bad, I'm putting you in this category. And instead I start going, well, let me find out the values behind why this person sees the world this way. And in that, I'm enhanced, they're enhanced. Believe it or not, I start liking Donald Trump a little bit more, and I think they start liking him a little bit less. And we come to this, sort of mutual understanding that we don't have to both love this particular person or this thing. We as humans, I have this thing, and I'm interested in what you think on this, Ted, but I have this thing that if you and me could take our beliefs and we run out there and we could talk to millions and millions of people all at once, I have a piece of the truth. You have a piece of the truth. Other people have a piece of the truth. Even ridiculous ideas help us get to the truth. So the more people we connect with and interact with, the more we are uncovering truth in my mind. And so for me, I've just learned that this is the way to do this. And I do want to get into how can we do this? And I'll give you one idea and then let you kind of go where you want to go. One of the things that I have found is that if I'm a little self-deprecating, not so much that you think I'm weak, but enough self-deprecating where I just say, this isn't my area of expertise, right? All of a sudden, I'm being a little bit vulnerable, and I think people want to come to your aid a little bit when you do that. And then, in addition to being a little self-deprecating, I can be a little complimentary, right? I could just say, this very simply, this isn't really my expertise, but Ted, this is your expertise. I'm interested in what you think. Right away with that brief comment, I get to open you up to something that you may have been closed down to sharing. And I'm wondering, how else this can be done. Do you see these as ways of doing this and different techniques that we can use? Like, are there rules of thumb with this, or is it all just about, trying to figure it out as we go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that what you said, like being a little self-deprecating or giving the other person a little bit of a compliment is helpful, especially in some situations. Like let's stick with you and me, right? Like a lot of times with between guys, let's say there can be a competitive dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And you can, it's just almost like automatic, reflexive, unconscious. You meet another guy and there can be like sizing up, like who's tougher, who's this, who's that. And so you can get into that mindset of the domination kind of thing, or domination submission. Who's going to be dominant? Who's going to submit? But that's not really connecting with the other person. And so I think there's a way in which the kind of things that you just said, where you might say something a little self-deprecating, or you might kind of compliment the other person, not in an overly excessive way, like you said, but just a little bit. I think that helps disarm that hyper competitive, we're going to duke it out. It's almost like you're unconsciously, or not unconsciously, but without totally saying it, you're signaling to the other person, like, look, dude, like, I'm not here to try to show that I'm dominant, right? Like we can just communicate, person to person, and we don't have to be in that dynamic. I think it sends that kind of a signal, and it opens up communication. It makes the other person comfortable, and you get more comfortable. And so there's like a back and forth like that. And just to go back to something you also said before about like Aikido or Judo, I think this is really like a kind of social Aikido or Judo, or in the book we talk about Tai Chi, which is it's also a martial art. And it's, these martial arts are based on the idea that in a conflict, one way to approach a conflict is to meet force with force, right? So then it's like you're banging up against each other, force on force. And you may win that battle if you're stronger physically, but if you're not bigger and stronger, force on force is probably not going to work very well for you. So these martial arts use this method of connecting with the other person and sensing the other person, sensing where their energy is going, and being able to connect with it, and in a martial arts context, redirect it away from you, or redirect it even towards the other person. And it's a kind of a smarter way to fight, in a sense. It's not just brute force. It's based on skill. It's based on finesse, an ability to connect. And, you could sort of say the same thing of like having a political debate. You meet someone who's a Trump supporter. I mean, you can approach that as force on force. Like, I hate Trump, or and we're just going to duke it out, and we're going to shout at each other. And the problem with that is that you started polarized and you ended polarized, and no one really was convinced of the other person's point of view, or learned anything, or grew in any way. But in the way that you described it, you came to understand this person better, and you had a pretty good conversation with them. Maybe you didn't end up being a Trump supporter, but you made some kind of a connection, and maybe because of the way you approached it, then they felt more open to maybe hearing your point of view. And I really think, our society is, not to get too much into politics, but we are hyper polarized. I think,
no question.
Social media can really feed into that, because our social media feeds are literally feeding us more of what we want to hear and pushing us more to the extremes of our positions. And it can tend to just divide the population even more. So we're spending less time actually talking to each other, doing the thing that you just described, more time on social media, feeling more and more polarized. And just to get really macro here for a minute, I mean, I think, we've got a lot of problems in the world right now that really require that we humans be able to work together, like talk to each other, understand each other, work as a team together to address these things. Because if we don't, there's just not a way to address them. It's, if we're all divided into two teams, team A and team B, and team A and B hate each other and can't communicate, and each team thinks the other team is just the devil, it's going to be really hard to address these things, and that's going to adversely affect all of us if we can't communicate or we can't work together.
Yeah, what is your sense on what that's really about? Is it just that we are so, like, part of me just thinks we are so averse to having our opinions challenged because our opinions have become our identity. So it's like if I have an opinion and I let it become my identity, and I'm always telling myself, Jade, do not let your opinion become your identity, because once you do that, you've lost the ability to grow, you've lost the ability to connect. Is it that we're just afraid of anything different than us? Like, what's your sense of what's going on there? I mean, you obviously you're a psychiatrist, so you work in this realm. People who are healthy and dysfunctional, people who are not healthy and dysfunctional. Like, what's your general sense of what's going wrong with us humans that we get ourselves into this state? What are we so afraid of?
I think it's what you just said is my best sense, is that excuse me. I think that many people let their opinions become their identity. So they think I'm a Trump supporting Republican, or I'm a, Trump hating Democrat, or whatever it is. I believe in this policy, or I'm against that policy. And all these things get wrapped up together in a package. And this becomes a really important part of the person's identity. Mm. And then they're getting a lot of messages from other people with that identity or on social media that this is right and the other people are the bad guy, and the other people are going to destroy the world. And that just whips up all kinds of natural instinctive reactions in all of us, like the other people are a threat. They're a threat to us. And unless we do something and defeat those other people, the world's going to be ruined, or the world's going to fall apart. So you can get into this mindset. And I think it's really cool that you consciously say to yourself, like, don't let your opinions become your identity. Mm. And I think if your opinions become such a strong part of your identity, then it is going to be harder to connect with people who don't share your opinions. I mean, there may be some place where you draw the line, where you say, well, look, I mean, if someone's opinion is something really outlandish, that it's fine to go around killing people or doing horrible things to people, then, at that point you say, look, I'm not really interested in being friends with this person. I'm not really interested in having a relationship with them. That's understandable. But I think short of that, making these opinions such a strong part of our identity so that we can't, let's take even religion for an example. Like, let's say, you're in a particular religion and this is the right way to view things, and anyone else with any religion is wrong. It's going to be uncomfortable or difficult to communicate with people who have different views from yours.
Yeah, or to grow at all, or to better yourself as a human. My whole thing is the idea, and the reason I wanted to do this particular podcast and named it the Next Level Human Podcast, because I do feel like our job is to grow ourselves so that we can positively impact the world. To me, I think, I don't know about you, but we do some of the same work. Like, I oftentimes look at people and I go, what would be the primary thing that if I could give Ted and the whole world one emotional way of thinking and being, it would probably be fulfillment. This idea that they use their signature strengths to go out into the world and do something of value, not for themselves, but for others. And they can feel that sense of pride at the end of their life. I feel like if we could focus on that kind of way of being, that I want to do something that can make a positive difference in the world, that begins to reframe things. And I do think, from my perspective, we're on the planet to learn, sort of to teach and to love, and love being sort of synonymous with what you did with this book, right? It's like giving your knowledge, your signature strengths, your experience to the world without need for acknowledgement or reciprocation, right? That's really sort of what it comes down to. And you talk a lot in the book about this idea that we are, an extremely lonely, society right now, largely because sort of the way we're showing up. But it's just a thought, and I don't know if you have anything, to add to that. But it's just so striking to me that the way to deal with our own loneliness is to look to allay that loneliness in other people. And that's what makes us connected. The way to address our own ignorance is to go out into the world and see what other people have to offer us. You did say one thing that I do think is pretty profound here, and I do think is something that we probably should address. What does happen when we bump up against people whose ideas are so atrocious, perhaps? Let's use the example everyone uses. We're running into a Hitler, or we're running into a situation that we believe is so utterly destructive that it's going to harm humanity. Part of my brain goes, I don't care what you believe, so long as your belief helps you and helps the world. I do start caring and wanting to, put stopgaps in place as soon as your belief begins to harm other humans. And that's a big gray area. So how do you feel about that? And how do we as humans sort of, when we're trying to connect, do you have any tools or tidbits or tactics that we can kind of go, this is when it's time to not necessarily connect with this person, or to disconnect,
Yeah. I agree basically with what you said, that when someone is really harming the world, harming other people, or harming you. I mean, sometimes people are in an abusive relationship where they're being harmed in the relationship. That's a time to put a stop to that in one way or another, to take a stand. And in that way, in doing that and putting a stop to that, you are really protecting yourself. You're protecting others. You're doing the most good you can for everyone. And how exactly to do that, I think, depends on the situation, right? There's lots of different scenarios that we could talk about. I mean, if it's at a big level, like if it's a Hitler type of a person, or if you think some corporation is spewing pollution or carbon into the atmosphere, or doing something that really is going to harm humanity, then I think it's completely appropriate not just to attune to them. I mean, attunement helps in order to have a clear perception of what the other person is doing.
I was just going to say, your model seems to address this. The attunement model also helps you know whether or not you want to be connected or not.
Right, right. About it. Yeah, so it's like you're relaxed, you're aware, you listen, you're taking in those cues from the other person, and you understand what they're doing. And by doing all those parts of attunement, you realize, okay, I get it now. This person is actually being really harmful. Then I think an appropriate response is to do what you can to say, enough is enough. We're not going to let you do this anymore. So whether that's political lobbying to stop this corporation from doing that, or if you're in a one-on-one relationship that's abusive, sometimes it's hard to see that when let's say you're in a romantic relationship or some kind of close relationship has an abusive element, and based on your own past history and your own patterns, you put up with that, or you think, oh, it's my fault, or you buy into what the abusive person is saying, that it's your fault. It takes a certain strength of insight and attunement to think to myself, no, that they're actually being abusive here. That was not my fault. I did not deserve that. And to set a limit, and sometimes to end up ending the relationship. You can use these skills of attunement to try to increase the quality of your relationship as much as you can. But as they say, it takes two to tango. And if the other person is going to stay in a position of being abusive, then there are times when it's just time to end the relationship.
Yeah, I totally can see that. And it's funny. One of the things that I think has always helped me as I've gotten into middle age is I have this idea of boundaries or standards by which I just go, I won't tolerate this kind of thing. Like I have this mantra in my head that I go, Jade, never let anyone treat you a way you are not or no longer wish to be. Just don't tolerate that. And one of the things, I don't know how much you know about Thoreau, but I read a lot of philosophy, and Thoreau, he wrote, his treatise on disobedience. And one of the things, I'll tell this now, you probably know this, Ted, but I wonder if they do. But it strikes me as this probably is the most, elevated model of, sort of dissent. Gandhi took a lot of his sort of, philosophy from Thoreau. A lot of people don't know that. So, it's a direct line from Thoreau to Gandhi to Nelson Mandela to, Martin Luther King. But one of the things, Thoreau, at a time when slavery was seen as just the thing and no one was questioning it, he was questioning it. At a time where Native Americans were being slaughtered, he was saying this is not a good thing. He was very pro-woman, very pro anti-slavery, anti-violence against Indians. And one of the things that he did, you might say, well, what did he do? Did he go out and fight? Did he pick up arms? And, he didn't believe in violence. So what he did is he stopped contributing to the American government. And his way of doing that is he stopped paying taxes. And they actually threw him in jail for this. He went to jail for a time for not paying his taxes. And in a very sort of awkward, sort of a weird thing, he might be one of the first people to become truly free by actually going to prison, right? This is, so it seems to me that there are ways of essentially just saying on a one-to-one level, I simply will not contribute or participate anymore in this. And I think maybe that gives people some license to say, oh, if someone crosses my boundaries or is doing harm, I don't need to do harm back necessarily. And that's not part of, morality. I think we all agree. Eye for an eye is not something that I think most people would think is a good thing. But I can stop participating and or contributing. And again, this goes right back to the first part, which I think is, you kind of brought my attention to, is this idea of a relaxed awareness of understanding ourselves so that we can, when we go through this attunement model, we can be in a position to say, yes, that is not something I want to do, nor will I contribute or participate in this again. And I know there are certain things where it's like, okay, well, my ex-husband and I have kids, and what do I do then? I had an affair with some guy who works in my building. I can't get away from him. Well, you may not be able to get away from everyone, but you certainly can choose the interactions you have and the way you interact. And so I think it's an interesting point, but I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I like Thoreau too, and I think that civil disobedience model, was so important for Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And it's, like you said, it's a way of saying we're not going to participate in this system that's abusive. We are going to bring attention to these abuses in a way that's not violent, but that brings attention to it. And on a personal level, there's a kind of a power in saying, I'm not going to participate in this anymore. It's almost, in some ways, I'm thinking now, like a more powerful stance than an eye for an eye. You know what I mean? Like if you feel like someone hurt you and then you kind of lose control and just lash out at them and get violent, I mean, that could end up harming you too, harming them, harming you. It's a kind of a downward spiral. But if you're strong enough and powerful enough to say, look, I recognize that this is abusive and I'm not participating in it anymore, there's a certain strength in that. And it does uphold important boundaries, like you said. So basically, I agree with everything you said.
Let's finish, Ted, with just a brief sort of discussion on some of these things that are really contentious in our society right now, and just see what kind of wisdom you might have. The COVID-19 things, the people who want to get vaccinated and people who don't want to get vaccinated, the Black Lives Matter, sort of a movement, people who are, essentially, quote, for that or against that, climate change. We seem to be dealing with some pretty big things in our society that really need to be solved, that we have created these civil wars over, these battles over. I think this is why, I wanted to talk to you, and why I think your book is absolutely critical right now to understand how to work around this. So do you have any sort of words of wisdom about these particular things, and when we're feeling triggered, and what are the ways in which we can begin to approach these, either things that we've already discussed or things that you would say, Jade, I think these are the steps we each need to take as individuals, to kind of be the standard, in a sense, of showing up in the world in a way that, other people can take an example from. But I'm just curious, how are we going to deal with this, man? I mean, like, what's your take on this? We're living in very strange times.
We are, and these are huge, huge problems that worry me a lot. And I'm not going to claim to have the whole answer to them, but from the point of view of our book, our book focuses on individual people or relationships between two people. But there's a quote we use in the book from the Dalai Lama where he talks about world peace through inner peace. So it's this idea that if we want to achieve world peace, we have to start by developing, each of us has to start with ourselves by developing a sense of inner peace. And then if we really develop that, then we can bring that to the world. And theoretically, if everyone did that, we really could get closer to world peace. And so I think, again, from the point of view of our book, if people work on these skills of attunement, if they work on relaxed awareness, if they kind of go back to themselves, and it's worth it. I mean, it will not just help with climate change and all those huge issues, it'll help in your own personal life. But if you go do some of these exercises on a daily basis, develop your capacity for relaxed awareness, and a few minutes a day of practice regularly, it becomes so familiar that then when you're in a stressful situation or you're in a heated political conversation or something, you actually can call upon that skill, kind of like a muscle memory, and you can use it in the heat of action. So if you develop these skills, you develop the ability to listen to other people, even when you don't agree with them, to try to understand their point of view, to try to meet them where they are. And ideally, if they're doing the same thing, if people can meet each other where they are and we can work on these issues together, we're going to get closer to the ability to communicate and work together. Because, like you said, there's no way to solve some of these problems if only half the people are doing it. Let's take climate change. If 50% of the carbon emitter type of countries or companies say, okay, well, we'll reduce our carbon emissions, but the other 50% are saying, well, we're going to accelerate them, we're getting nowhere. We can't do it with half the people. We have to have a way of communicating and working together as a team, realizing our fundamental commonality with other people, that we're here together on this planet, and there's no other planet that we know of that supports human life. And so we've got to figure out a way to work together.
Yeah, dude, I love that answer so much, because essentially it speaks to the idea of the next level human. Like, my idea behind the next level human is not someone who's better than other people. In fact, it's someone who realizes they're no better or no worse, but they can play a unique role, and they choose to play that role without need for someone to say, hey, good job. In other words, they show up as a good human, realizing that connection and this idea of missing each other, of walking right past each other, of not wanting to connect with each other, those are the things that we need to do. And if we can be an example for other humans just by living a good life, right, then other people are going to follow suit. If I am talking to you and I give you the law of charity, which is an old, sort of every philosophy, the ancient Greeks, the Stoics, all of these people talked about giving the law of charity. If I just show up that way, then I can, connect with you. And then using your rules of attunement, basically listening and understanding and, mutually responding to each other in a way that you leave each other more enhanced. I agree. And I know it's probably for a lot of people listening to us, Ted, it feels soft in a way, but it's not. It is incredibly powerful. And just like this, like you and I getting to show up right here, you writing your book, me writing my book, all of you listening, you don't have to be like Ted and I necessarily where you're putting out a big book. What matters is you showing up around the people who you influence as this person. And what happens is they will begin to respond. You can make a huge difference. Dr. Brodkin, I just love that you came on. I really love your book. Thank you to you and Dr. Palathra for writing this. Is there anything else you want to sort of leave us in sort of final things? And also, I would love for people to know where to find you if they have questions for you. The book, by the way, everybody, is Missing Each Other: How to Cultivate Meaningful Connection. It's a fantastic book. Definitely check it out. Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
Well, I want to just thank you again, Jade. And I really like express my admiration for your podcast and the themes of it, and this idea of the next level human. And I really resonate with that. I think it fits with what we're trying to do with the book. So such a pleasure to be on. And for people to connect with us, there's a few things. One is probably the first place to go would be our website, which is missingeachother.com. And you can connect with me and Ashley. I should throw in that my co-author, Ashley Palathra, who couldn't be here today, is absolutely terrific. So your listeners will love learning about her as well. So again, missingeachother.com. And then we also are blogging now on Medium and Psychology Today. So we have a blog called Missing Each Other Book on Medium and on Psychology Today, because we want to keep developing these themes that we started in the book and keep communicating and applying them to things that are going on in the world right now and engaging an audience. And we're also on Instagram and Twitter. Our Twitter is at Ted Brodkin and at Ashley Palathra. And on Instagram and Facebook, we're Missing Each Other Book.
Well, I'm so grateful for both of your work. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. In my book, you're definitely a next level human, and just love to get a chance to speak with you. Have an incredible day, and thank you again for your time, my friend.
Thank you so much.